Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Antonio and I'm Portuguese and I work between a tech company, startups, and academia in Cork, in Ireland. And today I have the pleasure of moderating this session with an esteemed group of experts. Boris from Siemens, Roberta from IDC, Arnaud from Schneider, and Phil from SSE. So to get us started, I'd like to take us a moment to reflect on how far we have come in terms of energy technology. I was recently at the booth yesterday where I saw a good number of smart meters. And that reminded me when I was a kid, 6 years old in Portugal. So I would like to reflect on that. At the time, somebody came to my home, will measure the electricity, and then a week later, that person will come in, it will give me the bill, and then it was basically home by home. So I would like to ask you, starting with Boris, when you were a 6-year-old, how was your relation with, what was your relation with utilities, energy, and how do you see the change from to today?
Well, I think we've seen dramatic changes, right? So, I mean, when I was young, actually there weren't even cell phones. So when you talk about the electricity bill, I mean, in Germany you still had somebody coming by, ringing the bell at the door, and then basically looking at your meter, taking the notes, and then some weeks later you got the bill. So very, very different. I mean, what I see now is, I mean, also in this world, change is now very fast. So when I think, let's say, what was 5 years ago and where are we now? I mean, 5 years ago, I would say we had very different use cases, let's say, and they were kind of separate from each other. So I think people were looking, for example, at network faults, others use cases, they focus on managing assets, doing condition monitoring, and then, for example, also looking at cybersecurity, managing vulnerabilities. And what I've seen as one of the changes, let's say, in the recent time is that these use cases, they seem to come together because the customers we're dealing with, I mean, they're facing all these challenges at the same time. So they have to manage their assets. At the same time, they have to make sure that they don't have a vulnerability, let's say, in a relay which is sitting in a switchgear. So they want to have that comprehensive picture. So I think we are moving, let's say, from having a use case, application-specific view to having a more integrated view, looking at a holistic picture of substations. I think another change I see is that ecosystems become more and more important. I think it's not one company, I think, will not be able to solve all the challenges we have alone. So I think openness, and I mean, in Siemens, obviously, this is why we have Siemens Accelerator, right, to have an open ecosystem. And I think a third topic, which is interesting, what we see in the discussion is cloud acceptance versus on-premise solutions. And I think we are in a conservative industry. But I see also there change. So I think the acceptance of cloud is growing. Clearly, we still have customers who say, I want to have everything on-premise. But we clearly see that I think the openness for cloud applications, cloud solutions is growing.
Roberta?
Okay, there is one thing that has not changed, which is resilience. And this needs to be recognized to the industry because despite all the very dramatic change also in the spike in demand, the different kind of power supply that you are using, the light is still on. It continues to be on. So one thing that we have to recognize to the industry is that over the different years, every time resilience has always been maintained. Now, in terms of changes, oh my goodness, everything has changed. I still remember when you mentioned the metering. I'm Italian, so for us, smart meter story was starting in 1999 with some initial pilot, etc., that Enel was doing. So it seems to be a very old story. But in the last 30 years, we have seen a continuous deployment of new technologies that have really profoundly transformed not just the really the way of working, because of course the market has changed. We went from a monopolistic type of situation into a market competition, and every day there is a new technology arriving. You mentioned cloud, but in the last period we are also seeing a lot of attention to AI and Gen AI, that everyone was saying that Gen AI is going to save everything. I don't think so, but that's maybe we will have the chance to discuss about it. But one thing that I have noticed is that more and more in the executive, there is this understanding that we have energy technologies that are digitalizing every day more and more, and those are two sides of the same coin, and we need to start having a sort of approach that is a little bit more holistic and platform-based. Some years ago, I remember that as IDC we do prediction every year, and we were doing a prediction saying that utilities will start transforming in platform-based business. And I still remember that we had a lot of companies say, oh no, that's a story for startup. And I said, that's not true. Look at the declaration that Enel was doing 4 or 5 years ago when they said that they want to become a platform-based business, and they are now. So I think that there was an increasing maturity on tackling technologies, and not for the sake of technologies, but for the sake of the resilience of the system and the continuity of the power supply.
Arnaud, please.
Yeah, if I take a personal angle, I think as a kid, I wouldn't care at all. Electricity is just a commodity, right? It's come to your house and you pay for your bill and that's it, right? So I think what's changed dramatically is that, you look at your own ecosystem as a person, and everybody's becoming a prosumer, thinking about, okay, should I put solar on storage? Yes, no. How do I manage my EV? Maybe it's still too much for the richer people in general. So how we make that available to the masses, I think, is an important thing. But however, I think it's the conscience, I would say, generally of the public around the topic is very high, and that's for me a big change because it starts there in the mindset. Now, in terms of what digital has really brought, what I'm seeing is really strengths of operations. Substations are digitized on the primary side, transmission side. Still some work on the distribution side. However, the grid operations are very well managed. I think that's what I see as a key cornerstone of availability of power, generally speaking, and that's something that is rock solid, that is being challenged, obviously, with the massive deployment of renewables and EVs, and I think that's why we need to accelerate. But there is a very solid ground from that perspective, right? I think the operations are pretty solid in general.
Phil?
Well, when you said this morning you were going to ask the question, I was the same. I never engaged with power when I was a child. So I took the advantage, I texted my mother and asked her. And her reaction was, well, it was much simpler then. John would come round, she knew his name. John would come round, do a meter read, and then tell me how much I owed, and I'd pay it. And she was basically saying, in a long text, that she missed those days. So for me, we've spent years and years making it much harder, thinking that we're making it much easier for our customers. We provide them more information, but the experience itself has degraded for me. It's a different experience. And I think the opportunity that we've got in front of us right now is that we can change the experience for the customer so that they go back to that more personal feeling and experience where it's just simpler for them. Information is explained, they're speaking their language, they're talking, they're not following process. And I think that's the opportunity that is right in front of us.
Going into more specific number of questions, I would like to ask you, Boris, how is Siemens leveraging digitalization to help customers to overcome all these challenges?
I mean, what we see in the market is that the energy transition is bringing a number of challenges. Just to name a few, I mean, obviously the number of e-cars is growing rapidly. So you have large networks of EV charging stations that have to be managed. At the same time, when you look at the distribution grid, I mean, there's a huge challenge to keep it stable, right? I mean, there are heat pumps, PV, e-cars. So I think it's a big challenge for the DSOs to keep the distribution grid stable. At the same time, when you look at the assets you have in your stations, the switchgear, the transformers, it's aging assets, so you have to monitor them. You need condition monitoring. At the same time, you have to worry about your network faults to have resilience in your network. And all of this with cybersecurity. I mean, you have to make sure you manage your vulnerabilities. And so what we see is that our customers, they don't have just one of these challenges. Many of them have 4 or 5 of these 6 challenges. And so what we have done is, as part of, let's say, the Siemens Accelerator, I mean, we have launched a new IoT suite. It's called the Electrification X. And in the end, what we do is we address all of these challenges in one integrated suite. So you get all the information, all the data for all of these challenges in one place, where we believe that it makes it a lot easier. I mean, we talked about make it easy for our customers, let's say, to first of all understand really what's going on in their stations. Do I have an asset problem, or do I have a cybersecurity vulnerability, or do I have a trip? So no matter what issue you have, let's say you see it in one place, and then you can react fast and make it easy. So I think from that point of view, this is the direction we go, let's say, as part of the Siemens Accelerator program with Electrification X.
We might have come later to the Siemens Accelerator later, but for now, Arnaud, how do you balance digital innovation with maintaining system reliability, and what have been the key outcomes of this approach?
I would say it's very imbalanced, actually, in the sense that I believe innovation takes ages to hit the field. That's a reality. So if you think about analog to digital transition, it's been taking more than 20 years, maybe not finished. Think about 6150 adoption, which maybe is a 15-year journey for a step 1, and then every step takes another 10 at least. So very imbalanced in the sense of, I think, let's say, benefit we have to the grid we talked about, which is reliability of the grid, is coming at the expense of the speed. And so far, I think it was okay, but given the challenge we are facing, we cannot wait, and the sense of urgency is growing. So we are really looking at how we can accelerate, globally speaking, the adoption of new technologies. So, for instance, we are working a lot on the software-defined power. So it is about virtualization of the controls, the protection in substations. That can be a huge accelerator of flexibility implementation to be able to locate intelligence at the edge. However, if that's taking another 15 years or 20 years, we won't be able to solve the problem of a limited hosting capacity of the grid that needs more flexibility. So what we are doing is trying to invest pretty heavily into providing the right proof points evidence, with a lot of testing that, yes, that can be a very reliable solution as well, but that solves a ton of other problems. So very reliable, but even maybe more reliable in some aspects. You can create more redundancies in IT systems that is not possible with hardware, right? So proving very quickly that there are technology solutions which can bring real solutions to the problem we are facing. Bringing this evidence, investing heavily into it, and trying to, with our colleagues from the industry and the ecosystem, with our customers and research, prove those things faster to deploy.
Okay. Roberta, from your perspective at IDC, how are the companies in this sector navigating complexities of digital transformation, and what strategies are proving most effective?
That's an interesting question, but I want to comment on something that Phil was to connect, because you say that we had made the experience more complicated, and that's exactly what is not working with the digital transformation or the strategy when they're not effective.
Yeah, I can give you an example. Not a while ago, I had to make a phone call for a service provider, and they were asking me to express by voice what I had to say. And the system was not able to understand me, so I have to go for a different tries until the system finally pick up what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, to answer your question, I really want to create the connection with the transformation of the power system. We have been talking a lot, and I think that we have been creating complication where complication was not needed. The energy system is extremely complex. We know it, and that's a fact, and we have to deal with the complexity. But sometimes in all these pilot exercise, we were overcomplicating it, and that was delaying a lot the pace of the transformation. I think that from a transformation perspective, we probably are in a sort of mid-stage, because every time that we do assessment, we also elevate a little bit the criteria for evaluating the maturity. And it's a continuous journey, but some of the things that were really resonating well with this idea of thinking about how to bring and to deploy in the field what is needed is really continues to focus on the purpose of existence of the power generator, the grid, etc., and try to find the right approach from a technological perspective, combining IT, OT, and all the different things that were available, but really to have a very clear strategy and try to reduce the unnecessary complication. We have seen a lot of companies addressing in a different way the data. I think that I'm a truly believer that data are the discriminant for taking the right decision, to be capable of understanding, and we're talking about flexibility, visibility into the grid. How can you run flexibility if you don't have the right information contextualized and in the right moment you need them? And so this idea of focusing on increasing the capabilities of transforming the amount of data into good insights, and so becoming an intelligent company, is something that was proved to be a right approach. And again, when we measure that, we are in the middle of the transformation. We have seen a lot of automation being deployed, and I think that that's a positive thing, also because we have to tackle, and maybe we will have the chance to talk about it, the also lack of talent and the need to augment the capability of the people in the field, or to replace sometimes the people in the field. I was looking at some data, and I have them written down because I never remember data. If you think about connection of distributed energy solution or PV, etc., Enedis Q2 2024, 1,000 megawatt of new PV. Enel Grids did 500,000 of new producer connected in 2023, which is 56% more than the previous year. And E.ON is saying that from now to 2030, 6 million of new small plants will be connected. So automating the connection and using this technology to speed up this process was extremely, extremely important. The other area, and with that I will stop, that we are seeing very important is really the augmentation of the people in the field. Using any kind of technology, but once again, to make them more accountable and more capable of doing what is needed to be done on the specific asset with the customer on the first visit and the first, again, action.
I think we will have time to go back to that element of augmentation and talent. But Phil, your company has been at the forefront of using AI to enhance customer engagement, and you are, for what I learned from you, are very passionate about that topic, to improve operational efficiency. What successes have you seen in applying such technologies?
So I joined SSE 2 years ago from an AI startup, and one of my remits was to integrate technology into the business, not to create a separate function, but to make technology part of the everyday. So I think we've had great success there. We've had great success in building agile methodologies, so thinking differently, so doing differently, but also thinking differently. So getting everybody, business, technology, to think about the customer before they think about anything else. What's the purpose of what you're doing? Yep. What's the purpose for the customer, and how will they receive it? And I think that's where the technology has made significant leaps in the last couple of years, significant leaps. And that's around generative AI, etc. But that's about the ability to talk to the customer in a language that makes sense to them, not your language. Also, so of course, everybody's had chatbots for a while, right? But chatbots, I'm sure you've all experienced them. You might have them in your businesses. They can be pretty rubbish experiences. They can be very much driving you down a process, whereas the latest large language models, generative AI, are able to use a lot more intelligence in understanding what's the customer's intent, what they're trying to ask, and what's the action on the back of that. And understanding intent has been a big drive for us. So I ask, how do I submit a meter read? The customer doesn't want to know how to do it, they want to do it. And it's just turning that around into the actual action. And that's not just for customers, that's for agents as well, because some customers don't want to talk via text. They can't, or they won't, or so those people need to talk via voice, and then all you really want to do is transcribe the call and do everything that you were doing for the agent, but you're supporting the agent in having a conversation with the customer. And this works whether you're talking to a customer or your customer is an internal customer or whatever. We never ask a customer for a piece of data that we already have. So the system is constantly going back, looking at the data that we hold on the person, and asking the customer to confirm this is correct. Not tell me this, is this correct? So it's a different experience. It's far more conversational. We don't drive our customers down process. We have conversations with them, and we fill in the gaps, and then let the system fill out all the forms in the back end. And taking that complexity out is a transformation in its own right, because for whatever reason, the systems have been built to be process orientated, to need certain data to feed them. It's now possible with the latest technologies to take that away. It's kind of automation, but it's beyond that. We're only asking to do the things that we need to fulfill the action. It's a different way of thinking about the problem. And that has been transformational. And I don't want to say we finished, because that is quite a journey. We're only at the beginning of it. But the results have been amazing. Customer feedback is amazing. And employee engagement is also amazing. You think to yourself, actually, all the employees, all the call center agents are going to hate this because it does them out of a job? No, it makes their job much better. They can fulfill our agents just want to do the right thing for the customer. They don't want to have to learn hugely complicated systems, which they tend to have to do, and hugely complicated policies. If we can feed them the answer, they can just have a good conversation with the customer.
Thank you, Phil. I would like to move on to a more broad and generic question, and I would like to have your input on that. As we look ahead, and how do you see open ecosystems and collaborations shaping the future of energy sector? We can start with you, Arnaud.
We clearly see them extremely important. And I think we have a great opportunity to maybe rebuild it from the perspective of things moving to software, which can create more easily open ecosystems, which everybody is striving for years and years. But the reality of it creates a lot of complexity actually. So it's not about bad will; it's about complexity is generating. And I think the move to software-defined things is an enablement to move to a different stage. So we're really seeing a world where people can collaborate on common platforms. There are a lot of initiatives around that, industry initiatives. So there is a E4S in Europe, there is a VPAC and a VPAC in the US, driving towards those, how do we define those standards as an industry, right? Before maybe it's becoming standards and regulation in the future, but that's taking too long. So how do we create those ecosystems where different companies can collaborate to bring their piece of the equation into a reality? So ecosystems have to form around that, I would say. So it's important to gather together the different actors of this transition. And set from the very beginning, which I believe is ongoing, some of the standards and the invariants that will make it possible for different companies to contribute.
Huerta?
Well, sometimes I say that there are 5 letters that we have to take into consideration: purpose, resilience, imagination, that is more than innovation, mastery and execution, and the 5th one is ecosystem. I think that the utilities industry cannot bring the transformation that is requested. We are talking about energy transformation, energy transition, without working with the ecosystem. It's a fundamental element. It is fundamental not just to have the right capabilities, bringing inside the collaboration with the partner for the power technologies, to adopt in the best possible way AI and all the other technologies, but also to play an active role. Because we are collecting the data right now from another energy transition survey, and if you look at the customer of the utilities, especially the commercial and industrial, everyone is talking about, oh, we want to progress in that. But the reality is that they don't know how to do it. And so that's another kind of ecosystem, industrial cluster, collaboration between the provider and the one that are using electricity, taking everything into consideration. Because, of course, if you are a steel manufacturer, maybe electrification is not enough. We have also to bring into the story the hydrogen component. So the future is ecosystem, and I think that utilities and anyone else has to really look at how to play the ecosystem economics in a way that deliver value for the individual company, for the industry, but also for the entire society.
No, I need to go to something that you said. As an analyst, do you think that in the ecosystems, all the players that could have a role in it, do they all understand their role in the ecosystem?
Quick answer, no. I think that some are, absolutely, and I think that there are very good alliances and collaboration among the different players. But when we look at the entire, at the different sector, but let's say the utilities or the energy-intensive company or all the other industries, there is a sort of big divide. There are the leaders that have clear the vision and they're really working to create this kind of ecosystem play, but there is a lot of laggards that are still thinking that, well, a little bit of collaboration, but that's, this is distinctive for me, I'm different, and in reality we are all different, but we are all aiming for the same thing. So I think that the maturity from that perspective is not yet there. So I think utilities have to drive that because they are really in a position to bring the other to the same table.
Boris, I think this will fit in with something that you said before about the accelerator. Do you want to comment?
Yes, sure. First of all, I really agree what Arnaud and what you said, Roberta. I think ecosystem and openness for ecosystems is absolutely key in the energy transition. The world became much more complex than it was 20 years ago. And therefore, I believe the only way to find the right answers is, let's say, is cooperation. So we really have to come closer together. I would say customers, utilities, suppliers in ecosystems really to solve the challenge of the energy transition. If we don't solve it, we will not become a sustainable world. And I think then we all know what it means for our children, right? So this is why I say we have to solve the issue of the energy transition, and we need to do this in an open ecosystem. So the challenge I see is how to do it. And I mean, when I look at our own company, I mean, as you said, right? I mean, we have Siemens Accelerator, so this is clearly the strategy of Siemens. But let's say, what does it really mean? It means that all the offerings we have, for example, have to have APIs, that we are open to connect to other offerings. May it be, let's say, from offerings from customers, from startups, sometimes even, let's say, competitors, other players. And this it's a lot of effort, and I think we all have to be kind of committed that we really do what it takes to get there. I think it's quite easy to say, hey, we are open for ecosystem. But in order to really build an ecosystem, I think it requires a lot of work on the technical side, on the portfolio side, to really make it work, so that you really have different offerings that can seamlessly interact. And I also think that on the business side, I mean, you also have to find partnerships which, let's say, produce a business value. So, I mean, having partners without a business purpose, I think it's very difficult. I mean, these partnerships, normally, they don't last very long. So I believe we have to really build an ecosystem which also functions on the business side. So, I mean, just if I pick an example, right? I mean, when I look at asset management, obviously there are many, many assets to manage. Should we now build an asset management system for all of these assets? Not sure this would be a good strategy, but perhaps there are other companies out there who can manage certain assets much better than we can do. So let's have an open ecosystem. Let's work with these partners. And I mean, then all together, probably we could have an extremely good asset management system. And this is, I believe, is a challenge we are seeing, is to go from, let's say, having the strategy to have an open ecosystem. I believe we all agree on this target, but then to really make it work on the technology side and on the business side. I believe this really requires a lot of commitment, engagement. And honestly, I also sometimes think it's a bit of culture change for all of us. I mean, we are all, I think, kind of focused, hey, my business, my company. And I mean, we have to have this openness also in our minds that, hey, it can be really beneficial to work together in an ecosystem. And I think it's definitely beneficial, let's say, for the future of the world, right?
No, Phil, no, you were, no, I would like to have your input on this, but also with the nuance that the fact that 2 years ago you were working for a startup. Do startups understand this language of ecosystems? You know, how do they can fit?
I was just trying to work out how I add to what's already been said, because I think they're really well-made points. I would just say, I think I would echo that there is a moral imperative to make this work and for organizations to work together in creating an open ecosystem. And that doesn't mean to say, I open up my APIs to you. It's that there is a common standard that works for everybody. So that if we were in a, if we'd open sourced the data architecture and the APIs, then everybody would just work to those. But organizations tend to, they tend to collaborate outwardly, not inwardly, if I can say it like that. That's just my experience is I will provide an open infrastructure, but I won't create an open ecosystem. And I think that's the moral bit that has to come in. And whether that's government-led or that's organization-led, I don't know the answer to that, but something's got to happen. It's our moral imperative to do that. Because the ecosystem is way broader than just providing power. There's so much more, demand-side response, etc. That will never work if we don't standardize it. And I lost track of the other question. Ask me.
No, I would like to know, coming from the startup world, how do you see startups fitting into this?
I worked for a corporate I started a startup. I come back to a corporate. I mean, one thing I learned is startups are bloody hard, right? You think, oh, you know, that's my dream. I'm going to go and be my own boss. You're not your own boss. You're everybody else's boss because you've got investors, you've got customers. It's hard, right? That's the one thing I learned about being in a startup. It's hard. But startups want to follow standards. They want to innovate, but they want standards. And I think you'll find that if you open source stuff, it will create an ecosystem of innovation with small companies adding to that ecosystem, adding value adds. And I think if there's one cultural thing that the energy sector can learn, it is to find ways of bringing in smaller companies that can innovate, that can help you drive without being hugely risk averse. I know that we all work in critical national infrastructure. We have to be careful, but there are ways of making that work. There are some amazing startups out there that just need an opportunity, and that's one of the things that I learned having been there. Is some really clever people, not the cleverest, I'm not going to suggest that, but some really clever people are out there building new companies. They just need a chance. And big companies tend not to give them the chance. So that's what I learned. Give them a chance.
Can I make a comment
Please?
on it?
Yeah, please.
I mean, perhaps from the perspective of a bigger company, I believe startups can play and have to play a major role in this ecosystem, and for two reasons. I would say one is speed, and the other one is creativity.
Exactly.
I think this is really the chance with startups. I believe in a startup you can have new ideas, you can bring them to the market really fast. I mean, obviously in bigger companies you have to follow certain processes and approaches. So I think in the ecosystem we talk about, I think the startup for me is creativity and speed and can really drive it forward.
But yeah, I'd say I'm with you on the speed, but I think the main thing is, as you are saying, if there is no revenue stream that's coming fast enough, no startup can live in that world, right? So, and I think being a startup in the utility world today is very difficult from that perspective, right? And so that's where I think working on faster technology adoption, I think IT has made it. So as our OT is moving to IT, maybe it's the right time to reconsider how we could do things differently and faster, because I think it's more the speed of this industry, which is the key thing to break, in my view, because of the change we face, but also because let's say the habits are very deeply anchored, and changing the pattern from that speed of adoption perspective, I think is maybe the biggest challenge, in fact, we are facing collectively.
Yeah, and I think that you touch upon creativity. I truly believe that sometimes you need to have the collaboration with the startup, and we have seen many utilities doing that, to bring a little bit of imagination, the word I was using before, because sometimes we have to think about and ask ourselves, can I make it differently? Because it's not because we have done it in that way for centuries that that's the right approach. And think about you were mentioning before, virtualization of the substation. Why we have not yet done it? Because probably we will start asking ourselves some question a little bit later, and then we were looking at different industry, bringing the good practices. So I think that it's important, the collaboration, even with the startup. Sometimes they start, sometimes they are acquired, and then they're becoming part of the DNA of utilities. But with the story of the digital transformation, there was a little bit more collaboration between the utilities, the startup, but also the big company in the power industry and the startup, because they were bringing ideas, and then they were scaled up by someone else. But the idea is the value that has been delivered to the industry. And sometimes they were successful and they were scaling up.
Can I just, again, real life experience coming from a startup back into a corporate. What struck me was, let's call them the corporate antibodies, but the processes that are designed to keep the machine running in the way that it runs today. The real innovation sometimes is tearing those processes down and starting again. So it's not a technology thing, it's a way of working thing. And that's when it comes to people, because we were going to come back to that, and it's really vital. Having people with a different mindset is really vital when you want to push innovation. You have got to have people willing to accept a different way of working, because you cannot just innovate, have this great proof of concept and then not realize it. You need people to enable that. So,
yeah, I agree. And if I can create a connection with that,
please.
and with these entire Gen AI stories that is flying around, AI, which I truly believe will change the world, not Gen AI, AI. But a lot of things were not becoming real because what we have done is look at little pilot, I do this little thing, but not having the courage to think, am I applying this to the right process? Am I really understanding the power of what can be implemented, pushing me to think differently and doing things differently? That's the thing. And when that will happen, AI will not just, let's say, increase productivity, increase reliability. It will transform and create growth and innovation in its full power. And I think that that's where the people makes really, really the difference. Yeah. Is the intelligent and critical way of looking at things that will make the industry progressing even quicker, probably.
No, now we have a few minutes to go. I would like to, before jumping to a last question, if nobody, I would like to let the audience, if somebody has any questions, and open the floor for it. Otherwise, we will proceed. So if someone has a question, we will just open the floor for it.
There is one.
One?
Thank you. This question is for Boris. With a Siemens accelerator, if you bring all these tools into the ecosystem, how do you deal with customers? If a customer wants to sign up with you, do you have to assign bill from all these different applications? I feel like that's going to be a bit costly for a customer, isn't it?
Our approach in the Siemens accelerator, it's a fully modular approach, right? So I think you have probably a very specific challenge you want to solve, and then you can pick, let's say, offerings, IoT applications, which fit exactly for this. But you only pay for exactly the application you need. And I mean, it could be a Siemens offering, but it also could be an offering from a partner. So I think it's not that you have to, let's say, buy a huge package and you pay for stuff you never need. So it's really like I think about it like a menu, you know? And you pick exactly what you need. And I think the menu has a huge variety because you find items from Siemens on it, but you also find menu items from many, many partners on it. Does this answer your question?
Okay. Any more questions?
Yes, I was wondering, we are getting into the stage of self-driving cars. How far away are we from self-operating electricity grids? And what are your views on that?
I can try and answer there. I think we are moving toward that, but there is a huge need of infrastructure upgrade on the digital side to enable it further. And that's where I think the software-defined play is super important. Because as of today, everything's related. The intelligence, the automation is into devices. So bringing that to computers will be a huge accelerator from that perspective. So I think we are at a baby step somehow from that standpoint, but that we have an opportunity to accelerate a lot. So there is already a number of automated schemes in managing typically the medium voltage grids. Now we see the need, for instance, to go down to the low voltage feeders because that's where the chargers are connected, the renewables are coming in, and voltage start fluctuating, and energy flows need to be managed at the local level. So I think we are kind of a step 1, and we need to go to a step 10 from that perspective to really automate the behaviors and maximize the use of the capacity of the grid where it is, because upgrading is too long and too expensive. Yeah.
Can I also make a comment? I would look at 2 things when you talk about the grid, right? I mean, you have to understand the stations, so really the substations. And let's say with electrification X, we really focus on the stations. You mentioned the grid. So to really manage the grid, especially now the low voltage grid, where you have the congestions because of the energy transition, I mean, it's another offering in an accelerator, it's a grid scale X. So, and I mean, I would say it's still a way to have a self-driving grid, as you call it. I think that's a very high ambition. But I believe in this offering, you already get a lot of, let's say, artificial intelligence support, let me call it like this, to identify critical areas in your grid. You get recommendations how to deal with these congestions in the grid. I mean, the final decision, let's say, really pushing the button to say, okay, I reduce load in a certain point in a grid. I mean, I think this is still done by an operator in a utility. But I think you get a lot of decision support already and recommendations. So it's a journey.
When we will have full digital twins, maybe we will be at a further step, because one thing that you said is there is always a human, because we don't trust what the algorithm is bringing us. And so there is the entire story of being sure that we have tested it, that we have seen it, because we have reliability that we need to be maintained. And so maybe it's a journey to go towards something that is more and more prescriptive from that perspective. But we also have to be sure that we are trusting that the technology is performing what is supposed to be performed. And I think the digital twin will introduce a little bit of possibility to test, trust, and then give the power to someone else to push the button.
Phil, you want?
I'm not sure about self-driving grids, and I don't think I'd let my car drive the grid. I don't think it's clever enough. I think we're a way away. I think that was the question, how far away? I think we're 20 plus years away from having the ability to let AI drive anything as complex as the grid. Yeah, I think we're a way away from it.
Okay, so we are a few minutes out of our time. So thank you so much, to the 4 of you for the panel, and thank you so much for all of you who have been out there watching us. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.